The town of Dusty Creek, Texas, held its orphan auction on the first Saturday of every month. It was not called an orphan auction. It was called a placement fair, which was the sort of name that made a hard thing sound respectable. Children brought in by the county, from failed homesteads, dead parents, or circumstances the county had judged unsafe, were presented to townspeople who could take them on as workers or wards in exchange for a small fee to cover administrative costs. Most of the children were gone within the first hour. The youngest went first. The small, round-faced ones women with empty arms reached for almost without thinking. Then the boys old enough to work, taken by ranchers and farmers who needed hands, and asked only whether the boy could lift, ride, and follow directions. It was September of 1876, and the Texas sun was doing what the Texas sun always does in September, insisting. Caleb Horne stood at the back of the crowd with his hat in his hands and no intention of being there at all. He was 38 years old, a cattle hand without a permanent place, with a horse, a bedroll, and the practiced economy of a man who had learned to need very little, because needing very little was easier than wanting things he could not keep. He was in Dusty Creek for 2 nights only, passing through on his way to a ranch job in New Mexico that might, or might not, still be there when he arrived. He had walked past the placement fair on his way to the general store. He had stopped because of the girl. She stood at the very end of the line of children, the last one, which told its own story. She was perhaps 14, though tall enough to be mistaken for older. Very tall, nearly as tall as many of the men in the crowd. She had the awkwardness of someone who had grown faster than the world had adjusted to. Dark hair in 2 plain braids, a gray dress too short because she had outgrown it and no one had replaced it. Her hands, large for her age, were folded in front of her with a composure that did not match her circumstances. She watched the crowd with dark, serious eyes that were doing the same thing Caleb's eyes did in unfamiliar places, taking stock, noting exits, preparing for outcomes. He had watched 4 families approach her and turn away, not rudely. The territory had manners of a kind, but with the quiet deflection of people who had come for something specific, and this was not it. Too tall, too old, too solemn, not the child they had imagined. The girl watched each family go without expression, which was somehow worse than if she had looked disappointed. Caleb was still standing there when the county man, a thin fellow named Greer, with a ledger under his arm, came to the end of the line, looked at the girl, looked at the ledger, then looked at Caleb. "You interested?" Greer asked. Not hopefully, more like a man closing out the last item on a list. Caleb looked at the girl. The girl looked at Caleb. "What's her name?" he said. "Rose," Greer said. "Rose Danner. Father died on the road from Kansas. Mother gone before that. No family located." "How old?" 14, nearly 15. Caleb looked at his hat, then back at Rose Danner, who was looking at him with those steady, taking stock eyes, and who had not once, in all the time he'd been watching, shown fear or pleading. Only assessment. $2, he said. $2, Greer confirmed. Caleb reached into his pocket. He paid the $2. He was not entirely sure, in that moment, what he was doing or why. He had no home to take her to. He had a ranch job in New Mexico that might not exist. He was 38 years old and had no practice with children and no qualifications for the responsibility he had just acquired. Rose Danner stood beside him while Greer filled out the paperwork. When it was done, she picked up the small bag at her feet. It was very small, which told him everything about what she owned, and looked at him. "Where are we going?" she asked. Her voice was level, no tremor, just the question of someone who intended to know the facts. "New Mexico," he said. "I have work there." "Maybe." "Maybe," she repeated. "It's what I've got." She looked at him for a moment, then nodded once, the nod of someone who has considered the available options and chosen the best among them. "All right," she said. They walked to where his horse was tied. He looked at the horse, then at Rose, who was nearly as tall as he was. "You ride?" he asked. My father taught me. Then we'll manage. They rode 2 days toward the New Mexico border, Caleb on his horse and Rose on a mule he traded for at the livery in Dusty Creek, giving up his spare saddle and some money for the animal and a day's feed. It left him with less than he had started with, but that was the arithmetic of the thing. Rose rode well. Her father had taught her properly. She sat easy, didn't fight the mule, and read the land the way people do when they've spent real time outdoors with someone competent. They talked in the way of people sharing a road who have no reason to pretend. She told him about her father, George Danner, a wheat farmer in Kansas until the farm failed. He had loaded what remained onto a wagon and headed for Texas with the optimism of a man who believed the next place might be kinder. He was a good man, she said, not lucky, but good. And your mother? Caleb asked. She died when I was 7, Rose said. Fever. I'm sorry. I barely remember her, she said, not coldly, just honestly. I remember her hands. She had good hands. Caleb said nothing to that. After a while, she said, What about you? He gave her the truthful summary, if not the whole story. He had grown up in Tennessee, come west at 20, worked cattle for 18 years with no fixed address and no family of his own. He had been married once, briefly, to a woman named Helen, who had died of cholera in 1869, along with the child she had been carrying. A child who would, by now, have been almost Rose's age. He had not said that out loud in 7 years. He was not sure why he said it now, to a 14-year-old girl on a mule in the Texas desert. Rose listened without interrupting. When he was done, she was quiet for a moment. I'm sorry about your wife, she said, and your child. Thank you. How old would the child have been? He thought about it. 14, maybe 15. Rose looked ahead at the road. Same as me. Same as you, he said. They rode in silence after that, but it was not an empty silence. The job in New Mexico existed. A rancher named Aldous Webb, outside the town of Cimarron, needed a capable hand for fall cattle work, branding, fence repair, moving the herd to winter pasture. The pay was fair. There was a bunkhouse and meals. There was, however, no provision in the arrangement for a teenage girl. Caleb explained the situation to Webb plainly, because plain speaking was the only kind he knew. Webb, a practical man of 50 with a wife named Clara and a ranch that had been running for 20 years, looked at Rose for a long moment. Rose looked back at him with the same steady eyes. She work? Webb asked. Ask her, Caleb said. Webb looked at Rose. Can you cook? Yes. Garden? Yes. You afraid of cattle? No. Webb looked toward the ranch house, where Clara Webb had appeared in the doorway and was already studying Rose with an expression Caleb recognized immediately. The look of a woman who had seen enough to decide. She can sleep in the house, Clara said. We have the room. And that was that. The fall work was good work, the kind that filled the day completely and left a satisfying tiredness behind it. Caleb worked cattle with Webb and the other hands. In the evenings, he came into the ranch house, where Clara had supper on, and where Rose had, he quickly learned, made herself useful in ways Clara discussed freely. That girl, Clara said one evening, can cook better than I can. Don't tell my husband. Caleb looked at Rose, who was setting the table with the efficiency of someone who had done it for years. Where'd you learn? My father couldn't cook, Rose said. Somebody had to. She said it without self-pity. That was one of her steady qualities. She told the facts of her life without ornament, without complaint. Whether that was temperament or training, Caleb did not know. But he found it restful. Without meaning to, he had begun looking for her at the end of every day. Not anxiously, just the way a person looks for something they have grown used to finding. The dark braids, the straight-backed way she stood, without apology for her height. She, in turn, had begun saving him the chair by the window at supper, the best chair, without ever mentioning it. These were small things. But most of life, when it is good, is made of small things. The trouble came from town. There was a boy in Cimarron, 16 years old, the son of a merchant, with the confidence of someone who had always had enough and had never been required to build character in its place. He saw Rose during a supply run and made the sort of remarks boys like that make, specifically about her height, specifically loud enough to be heard. Rose said nothing. She finished the errand and came home. Caleb heard about it from the Webb's younger hand, who told the story with the indignation of a 19-year-old who still believed the world ought to be fair. He went to find Rose. She was in the garden behind the house, kneeling in the dirt with the full concentration she gave to any work worth doing. "I heard about town," he said. "It's nothing," she replied. "It's not nothing." "It's not new," she said. "People have said things about how I look since I was 10. I'm still here." He leaned against the fence. "Does it bother you?" She sat back on her heels and looked over the rows of green. "It used to," she said honestly. "Now I mostly think those people don't know me. What they say is about what they see. What they see isn't what I am." Caleb looked at her for a long moment. "That's a hard thing to know at 15, he said. 14, she said. Still 14 for 3 more weeks. That's 14 then. She almost smiled, then actually smiled, the quick, real smile that changed her whole face and made her look younger than she ever allowed herself to seem. "Did you go to town to say something to him?" she asked. "I'm considering it." "Don't," she said. "It'll make it a story. Right now, it's nothing. Leave it, nothing." He looked at her, then nodded. "All right." He left it nothing. But the next day, while in town for supplies, he had a quiet word with the merchant, the boy's father, that was neither a threat nor a scene, and which the merchant understood completely. The boy had, after that, a different kind of day than he was used to. Rose never knew, or if she did, she never said. The fall work ended in November. Webb paid Caleb well and offered him winter work too, less, but enough. Caleb said he would think about it, and that was honest, because he was thinking about something he had not expected to be thinking about at all. He had come into Dusty Creek with almost nothing. He had spent the last $2 in his pocket on a girl at the end of a line in a dress too short for her. Since then, there had been the mule, the supplies, the road, the meals, the ordinary expenses of keeping 2 people moving. He was not poor now. Webb had paid him. But he was also not a man with a plan. Winter was coming. Rose Danner was 14. And he had no proper home to offer her, no certainty beyond a season. One evening in November after supper, with the ranch house quiet, Clara and Webb gone up to bed, Rose sat across from him mending the hem of a dress with the focused attention she gave everything. Caleb watched her hands move. He thought of Helen. He thought of the child he never met. He thought of 7 years spent traveling light through the world, because a man with nothing attached to him has less to lose. Then he said, "Rose." She looked up at once. "I need to tell you something." "All right," she said, setting the mending aside. "I don't have a home to offer you," he said. "Not much of one. I have a horse, wages, and a good name with ranchers in this territory. That's what I've got." She listened. "I've been thinking Webb might keep me on permanent. year-round. If he did, and if you were willing, this could be something more fixed than it's been. Fixed how? She asked. He looked into the fire. I'm not your father, he said. I know that. And I'm not saying anything improper. You're 14, and I'm 38, and that is not what this is. He met her eyes. But I stopped at that fair for a reason I didn't understand then, and I think I understand it now. I'd like to be responsible for you properly. Legally, if that can be done. If you'd want it. Rose was still for a long moment, thinking the way she always thought, fully, carefully. You want to adopt me, she said. If you'd want that. Why? Not accusing, just wanting the truth. Caleb considered before answering. Because you're the most capable person I've spent time with in 18 years of meeting people, he said. Because I think I stopped at that fair for a reason. Because I'd like to have someone to come home to. And I think you'd like to have somewhere to come home to. Seems to me we've been making a fair attempt at that already. Rose looked down at the table, then back up. I'd want that, she said. Aldous Webb gave Caleb the permanent position. The county and Cimarron handled the guardianship paperwork with the quick practicality of a frontier territory that had little patience for unnecessary complication. Clara Webb, who had been following the entire matter with the satisfaction of someone watching things turn out as they should, made a cake. Rose grew another 1.5 inches the following year, which made her taller than every man on the Webb ranch except the largest hand, who treated her with cheerful respect as an equal. She was not, it turned out, too tall for the world she lived in. She was exactly right for the life she was building. She learned to work cattle alongside Caleb. She read every book Clara owned and sent away for more. She expanded the kitchen garden until it was the best in the county, and by 16, was teaching neighboring women what she knew about desert soil, which they accepted with the gratitude of people who had been needing that knowledge, and were glad someone finally had it. At 17, she told Caleb she intended to own land of her own someday. I know, he said. You're not surprised. I stopped being surprised by you about a week after I met you. That earned him one of those rare, real smiles. Caleb Horne worked the Webb Ranch for 11 years. He was not a man of speeches. He had said what needed saying that November night by the fire, and saw no reason to improve on it with talk. But he showed up every day. He did the work. And every evening he came back to the ranch house where a tall young woman had once saved him the chair by the window, and never stopped. Over time, that chair, and the saving of it, became something Caleb had not had in 7 years, and had stopped believing he ever would again. Something to come home to. On the evening of Rose's 21st birthday, a spring evening with the New Mexico desert in bloom, she found him at the corral finishing the evening feed. I want to ask you something, she said. Ask. She looked at him with the same dark, serious eyes that had been measuring him since the first moment in Dusty Creek. Are you glad, she asked, that you stopped? He looked at her, tall, capable, 21 years old, steady as ever. Every day, he said. Every single day. She nodded, the nod of someone hearing confirmation of what they already knew. Then she went inside to start supper. Caleb finished the feed and stood for a moment in the spring evening, looking out at the sky, thinking about $2. The last $2 in his pocket on a September Saturday in Texas, and what they had bought him. Not a worker, not a ward, a family. Not the one he had lost, not the one he had imagined, but the one he had found. found for $2 on a dusty street in a town called Dusty Creek, at the end of a line, in a gray dress too short because no one had thought to replace it. The best $2 he had ever spent.